You've seen my Remington 870 Police Magnum a couple times on my channel, and it had been a while since I had really done any deep cleaning on this, and I also had some ideas on some improvements that I wanted to make to this shotgun, so I figured this would be a good opportunity to take some footage. Now, I'm not exactly sure of the year on this. I found some conflicting information. It could be from like 1980, it could be from 2005. The characters that are stamped into the barrel look like the letter A and the letter J. And then the serial number starts with a C. So I'm not really sure how to tell exactly what year it is. But at any rate, this is a gorgeous example of a Remington 870 Police Magnum with wood furniture on it. It also has the rifle sights, but it has a smoothbore barrel, and it has the extended magazine tube. Now, I do love a good metal shotgun with a wood stock, but there can always be some improvements that you could do to these shotguns to make them a little bit more appealing and cooler based on some historical models of shotguns that you've seen in the past. So I know that Remington had a folding stock for these shotguns, and I've been watching a lot of retro 80s movies lately and 80s cop TV shows, and I've seen quite a few examples of this thing show up in those shows. Things like RoboCop 2, where you see a bunch of the bad guys wielding this shotgun when they're climbing around in various areas and different scenes throughout the movie. And again, just has that iconic outline, something that's really easy to pick out. In Rambo First Blood Part 2, you can see some of the pirates had one of these shotguns. They held it to Stallone's head, and then he promptly took it away from them and used it against them. I love Stallone in these old movies. One of the most notable scenes is probably in the Terminator 2 Judgment Day at the end when Sarah Connor is shooting the Terminator 1000 with the 870 with a folding stock. We've also had some notable YouTubers like Tim from the Military Arms channel that did a feature on one of these a couple of years ago.
And it's an old, and this is all original, guys, a Remington police shotgun from the 60s. One of my friends on the local police department saw it. I showed it to him, and he goes, man, I remember when we had those. And it's built on an old Remington Wingmaster receiver, and it has the original law enforcement only stock on it. I don't know if you guys can see that because of the lighting. It's got a little bit of recoil, and that hurts. So you see where they fold the sheet metal over right here? That's where your face is. Yeah, that'll make you flinch. That thing bites into your cheek, right into your teeth. Ouch. I love it. Too much.
Now, the example that Tim from the Military Arms channel had was similar to this, where it had a wood foregrip and it had the original Remington folding stock on it. As he showed in his video, this is actually a pretty chintzy stock. They're made out of just folded sheet metal with a little piece that folds down for the shoulder and a very hard plastic pistol grip on it. These are very difficult to find and they're very expensive. And to be perfectly honest, from what everybody said, they're kind of crappy to use. They're flimsy and they don't tend to last very long. So I did what I normally do and I go searching on the interwebs. And once again, I found a Choate Machine and Tool folding stock for this particular shotgun. Now, if you recall, recently I did one of these on my Mossberg Maverick 88 in 20 gauge, and I really like the design of these. They're a solid steel bar with a plastic coating around it where your cheek rides on it. The shoulder piece actually is spring loaded, so when you open the stock, it always flips down to be where it needs to be on your shoulder. So I decided I was going to do a little bit of cleaning on this shotgun, and while I was at it, I might as well do a little bit of updating. And this kind of turned into a comedy of errors because as I started to take things apart to clean them and started to assemble things, I started realizing that I really didn't have some of the correct parts I needed to make this happen. And again, it's kind of a foolish thing, but here you see me taking the stock off. There's no big deal here. You got the two screws on the recoil pad and then one screw to get the stock off. So this is actually a pretty easy swap. You can see once the factory stock is off, the new one basically just sits on the end of it. There's only one bolt that holds either one of the stocks on. In doing this swap and remembering what I had to go through for the Maverick 88, I did have to take off the actual shoulder piece for this stock. However, this particular one, the Allen screw, the set screw that was in there was so tight I couldn't get it off at first. So I decided to just try to put the Allen bolt that holds the stock onto the shotgun in. And in doing that, this is when I started finding out that there was a problem. So the Allen bolt that came with this thing was a quarter 20 bolt, and I should have probably checked the thread pitch on the original bolt first. I was able to stick the screwdriver and the Allen wrench up into the stock itself so that I could line everything up and put it on in theory if it was the right thread pitch. But as I started to realize very quickly, the thread pitch on the two bolts was extremely different. Before I started cross-threading this thing, I figured that I should take that bolt back out knowing that it wasn't starting and look at the difference between the one that came with the stock and the one that the original stock had. And if you look at the two of them side by side, the bolt that came with the new stock is a quarter 20 thread pitch, and the one that came out of this stock is a quarter 28 thread pitch. So the next day, I went to the hardware store, I dug through their bolts, and I was able to find the correct bolt. Then I tried again harder to get the set screw off of this stock, and I did break it free, and I pulled a muscle in my chest, and then I started to actually disassemble this thing to make it a little bit easier to put it together. Now, thinking I had the correct bolt, at least I had the correct thread pitch, I started working to put this stock together. I did have to use the Persuader 3000 to get that pivot pin out so that I could take this thing completely apart. And once that pivot pin and the spring washers came out, I knew I could start putting this thing together. Or could I? Because then I noticed that the sling swivel was in the way. I could not get a ratchet in there. So once I stuck the bolt down in there and tried to stick a socket on it, it didn't fit. So then I had to take the sling swivel off. So while this may be a little bit tedious for a lot of you to watch, at least if somebody's going to do this swap, use my mistakes as a guide so that you won't have the same thing happen. Once that sling swivel was off, I was finally ready to put the stock back on. So I grabbed my quarter 28 bolt and started threading it into the receiver, and very quickly I realized that there might still be a problem here. While it was the correct thread pitch and it threaded all the way into the receiver, once I got it tight, there was still a lot of room on the bolt because it was too long. So instead of going back to the hardware store, I went out to my garage and I dug through my bucket of bolts. And if you don't have a bucket of bolts like this, do you even work on projects? I mean, come on. This was actually a bucket of bolts that my best friend's dad gave me because he worked in a body shop. So I have here on the left the bolt that the stock came with, the one that I bought at the hardware store, the one that I ended up using, a metric bolt, which I don't know where I got that one, and then another quarter 28 Allen bolt that was a little bit too short. So what this ended up being was about 1.25 inches long, and I used 2 washers on there just to make it fit because it was still a tiny bit too long. Probably need to use a 1 inch by quarter 28 thread. But this time around, everything was going smoothly. I had the correct length bolt, the correct thread pitch, went in there perfectly fine. I was able to snug the bolt down, get the stock completely tight on there, and then I started putting the sling swivel back on, and then after that I also put all of the spring washers back into the stock and put the actual shoulder piece of the stock back on. So it was starting to look like everything was going correctly. This took me a little while to put the stock back together. Those spring washers can be a little bit, difficult to get lined up perfectly. You kind of have to put the spring washers in, put the pin part way in, and then shimmy the stock in, and then hammer that pin back in. It really shouldn't have to be hammered through, but after you put a set screw in it a couple of times, it does put a burr on it. Sometimes you got to persuade it just a tiny bit. So I was able to get the shoulder stock put back together. I was able to get the pin in there lined up, and again, using the Persuader 3000, tapped it back in place, finally put the set screw back in, and I was done. Or at least I thought I was done, because once I got the set screw back in the stock, I realized after I snugged it down really good and tested the folding mechanism on the stock, verifying it works, I realized that there was a piece that I forgot to put back in the back of the receiver. So I'm putting this in 8 times speed right now. I did have to take this thing completely apart again, take the stock back off of the frame, put that plate back on the back of the receiver where it belongs, and then reassemble the whole thing. So the whole point of this part of the video, and I know it's kind of tedious watching me do this work, but I'm hoping that somebody else, if they ever do this modification, will know from my video that they need to do this in a precise order and that they need to check the thread pitch and everything on the bolts before they do it. Realistically, the swap is not hard. It should only take you about a half an hour if you do this correctly and don't have all this mistakes that I had. But now that the shotgun is back together, it looks really cool. Now, it may not be quite as cool as Fred Dryer using a SPAS 12 in the TV series Hunter, but as Fred Dryer always used to say,
Works for me.
so yeah, this works for me. This is a really cool, folding stock, iconic shotgun, and it does kind of resemble something that you would see from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s in a police inventory, or something you would see wielded by either a hero or the bad guy in a movie. So thanks again for watching another edition of Cranky Gun Reviews, and another edition of a police or riot or military style shotgun. I really, really enjoy these things, and I am glad that I have various different configurations now. Have a great day. God bless America. Support your 2A rights. Get out there and shoot. And you remember, if someone asks you to give up some of your freedom for the greater good, remind them that freedom is always the greater good. And don't be afraid to go back and watch those 80s and 90s movies and TV shows. They're cheesy, but some of them are really good.